Hi everyone, it's Tanya MFK here with the week 5 lesson recap from the 52 weeks of momentum with Benjamin Hardy. If this is your first time, welcome. I am Tanya Maria Figueres-Kreisinger, more easily known as Tanya MFK. I am the founder of Build-A-Biz and the Biz Builders Facebook group, which focuses on bringing education, motivation, and balance to entrepreneurs so you can make sense of this path and not burn out. Pretty important, right? So what I am doing is I'm a member of the 52 Weeks of Momentum course with Benjamin Hardy, and I come in here every week to share the lessons, the insights, the exercises, and things that we're doing so you can tag along and get yourself a piece of the momentum this year. So without waiting any further, let's jump into week number 5. So we're already at week number 5. So what we have been doing is we've been reading Cal Newport's Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And we were asked to find 3 to 5 insights from that book. And if you're not familiar with the book, it basically focuses on dispelling what he calls the passion hypothesis. And that is the belief that there is some hidden, magical, uncovered passion that we're supposed to be finding, something that is just right for us. And once we can uncover what that passion really is and create a career and a life around that, that's when we will truly be happy. And he has spent time finding successful people and basically dispelling this myth, what he's calling a myth, that it's not about finding a passion. It's more about creating career capital, which is developing the rare and valuable skills. And when we develop these rare and valuable skills, that is when we find confidence in what we're doing, enjoyment in what we're doing, tends to lend itself to freedom because we're good at what we're doing. We can do it either on our own or if we're in an office setting, our bosses are giving you more autonomy, to kind of do what you want. And he says once we do this and we're developing these, that is where we find the happiness in our careers and what we're doing, right? So that is what we've been focusing on from that. And I bring this up, even though I chatted about it a little bit last week, but I bring this up because I took that information and I did a little exercise, and I actually shared it with our 52 Weeks of Momentum group. There's like 700 of us in there. And it worked really well for me. It was so amazing, and a lot of other people found help with it as well. So I figured might as well share it with you guys too. So what I did is what I'm calling my career capital inventory, and I listed all the items that I believe were my career capital, and those could range from skills I've developed, how I've developed those, to skills I've acquired. Sometimes those are certifications and types of things like that. And some of them are even just challenges that I've overcome, because a lot of times challenges that we overcome are also become skills, where it's also something teachable to say, oh, I had that issue and this is what I was able to do. So depending on your situation, if you're looking for a job, maybe you need to stick with skills you've acquired or developed. If you're really doing this, like for me, it was really kind of a bigger picture at hand. So all of these things were applicable to what I was kind of wanting to look at and get a slice of where I'm at in life. So we listed all of those down. But then I wanted to look at them a little more objectively. So I made a little graph, right? I did like an Excel sheet, and I wrote, the next column said, what makes this rare or valuable? What's so special about this anyway? Sometimes it's just because I have my own spin on it. Sometimes it's just because I am part of still several other people, but we're still a small group who know how to do a certain skill. It could be even how recent the skill is. Perfect example from a just career capital standpoint. As a marketer, I know how to do Facebook advertising. Now, Facebook advertising is changing all the time. So if you learned Facebook advertising 3 years ago, you may not be up to par with what's happening in 2018. Now, that is something that I do have as a skill. I'm very aware of what just happened recently and all the new changes. So there are many other people who do as well, but we're still a small group, right? So there's still something rare and valuable in something as simple as that, right? So I was able to say, what's so rare and valuable about that? And kind of write a little note. And then how good am I at it really? So even if it's rare and valuable, am I like the greatest at it? Am I not good at it? Is it really, the high end, the low end, right? So I just did a 1 to 5 scale. So what makes it rare and valuable? How good am I at it? And the next one was, how does it or can it benefit others? right? Because there's always a bigger picture at hand. So it's great that I can do it, but how does it really affect anyone else? How can I help others with this? Is this something I can help others with? And then after that, I did, how can I develop this career capital further? So this is something that he talks about in the book. If you're reading the Cal Newport book, he talks about how elite athletes and stuff, they do this deliberate practice, right? They get to the point that they're at because they're deliberately practicing something. You know, basketball players, like things, they don't just come with an innate talent and they're like, okay, I'm good now. It doesn't matter where they find you. You know, when you get recruited, you still have to go to practice. If you show up, you're on the NBA, you still practice, right? You still have to get better. You have to continue to push yourself to be the best of the best of the best, right? And if we don't do that, we plateau, right? We're not going to get any better if we're not actively doing it. So to be honest, there were things I looked at and I rated myself very high and was like, I'm really, really good at this. And then when I got to this question, how can I get better? You know, I was like kind of cocky at first, like, well, I'm pretty good at this, right? Like, I'm kind of amazing. And then I started looking like, wow, there are definitely things I can do to expand upon this. There are areas that I've never even researched or looked into or can't recall or quote. Again, to put this into an example is I'm exceptional at organizing and planning, putting things together for project management, things like that. I like to teach that as well. However, I realized I'm not aware of other people in the industry and what their theories and methods are. And this is something that I should be looking into and I should be learning more about and be able to reference and take things from or dispel things from, whatever it is. But the fact that I'm so narrowed into just what my capabilities are, I haven't paid attention to what else is going on in that as an industry. So it's so important for me to go, this is a practice I can do, is to start becoming aware of the other theories and the science behind planning and organization. I can definitely get better at this thing that I think I'm a 5 at, right? So just to put it in perspective, like that's that, and I give an example, that's what I was doing. So I said, how can I develop it further? That was what I looked at. And from that, can't just stop there. How will I actually create that practice? So for myself, based on my schedule and lifestyle and all of these things, I have committed to 2 hours every week. So it's actually 1 hour, 2 times a week. So it's like a Tuesday, Thursday I've set up so far. See how it goes. It's the first week that I'm going to dedicate 1 hour to improving some of these items. You know, a few of the career capital things that I've listed. I have a few that I want to improve upon. And so I now have subject matter and I know, okay, Tuesday, 1 hour, I'm focusing on improving this. And Thursday for 1 hour, I'm focusing on improving that. So I now have a plan, right? So this to me was just amazing. I mean, it really gave me a snapshot of where I'm at, what I'm doing, what I want to do, what I want to go further. And so I don't plateau as a human, as a skilled professional, any of those things. So I thought it was amazing. It wasn't just me. I shared it with the group and a lot of people loved it and found it helpful as well. So I hope that some of you can see value in that as well. So there was that. Moving on to kind of, again, I'm always reviewing what we get in our lessons from Benjamin Hardy. So we had that, and then he recaps that we are doing these month-end accounting, right? Month-end accounting, I call it like monthly inventory. And all this is at the end of the month, we are looking back and we are listing what happened, right? Because sometimes that's relevant, you know, like what was actually going on. Like, wow, it was a big, busy month. There's a lot going on. For myself, I had moved from Thailand to Vietnam. There's a lot of happenings. There's things going on. And what were my accomplishments and milestones, right? So really kind of in a nutshell, what was all the stuff going on and the highlights of that month. And then what were some of the lows? Like what didn't I accomplish? What didn't I do so well? And the third part is what can I improve upon and what are my goals moving forward to make that better for the next month. So if you are following along, if you're doing these exercises, that is something to start instituting every month, is to look back on your month objectively at those 3 items and set a plan moving forward. And this is a great thing. And he mentions in the video that this is something, imagine looking back in a year and going like, wow, A, I have an accounting of all the awesome stuff I've done. And B, I can look at what I've set to improve and what I've actually improved and how my months and year has progressed. So I think there's a lot of greatness in this exercise. So again, highly recommended. We're all doing it. If we're in the group, we're required to do it. So, super excited. So moving on from that, he mentioned that he was at a conference recently. He was in Austin, and he was at a conference with an author and great scientist named Bruce Lipton. And in the seminar, they discussed kind of this. So basically, we have the concept of mind over matter, right? That's something most of us have all heard. It's been around for a long time. And it's the idea that, where the mind goes, physical follows. And there is definitely truth in that. But they are now recognizing the power of environment as well, right? It's not just what's here, it's what's out here, and how we are directly connected to our environment. So that's the conference he was at. And it was the field of study that this is surrounded in is called epigenetics. Right? It's like, well, what? We're getting a little sciencey here. Epigenetics. We're going to go into it even further, right? We have this lesson and next week's lesson. Trust me, you're going to get used to some epigenetics. So it gets a little heavy, but what I've done is I've kind of narrowed it down to some key takeaway points. So if you want to take some notes, check it out. We're going to get ready here. So first takeaway point from epigenetics is that the DNA you were born with, right? What mom and dad gave you is not necessarily what's expressed at a genetic or cellular level. You're like, okay, don't know why that matters to me. We have a huge supply of genes that are turned off or on depending on our environmental signal. Okay, so to narrow this back in, is like mom and dad gave me DNA, that's just who I am, that's what it is, and there's not really anything I can do about it. But au contraire, epigenetics is saying the environment is showing, our genetics, our genes are showing that they are responding to environmental signals. So there is some change, there is something, it's not just what we've been given. It's not like, well, that's it, there's nothing I can do about it, right? So this is kind of a big deal. So that's takeaway point number one. Takeaway point number two, when we put ourselves in certain environments, these change, right? So obviously in the environment can send signals and we have some biological change. So of course we also have choice of the type of environment we put ourselves in. And again, when we do this, we can see that there's change. So a good example of this is something like putting yourself in a school situation, or maybe hanging out with a lot of negative people or a negative environment, or in mastermind groups where you're being pushed. They're showing not only is this a mental thing where you're like, oh, I'm around more positive people, so I'm feeling positive, but they're showing that there's an actual biological change that goes on. Okay, kind of neat. So takeaway number three from this is that the belief, as I kind of mentioned, the belief from genes and what we've been given is that we had fixed traits. Like everything was just kind of, that's just the way it is. And if there was a problem, the only way that we would address this is at the biological level. And a great example of this is within mental illness, right? Which is definitely something that's happening at a biological level. So a lot of the approach to taking care of that is also at a biological level with the usual medications and whatnot. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There's nothing bad with that. But what we're also seeing and learning in epigenetics is that the environment are also having a biological effect. So if we're only addressing it through the biologics of the medication, we're missing a whole component that is also affecting the situation, which is the environment, right? Like kind of exciting, wild, changing, like a whole other thing. So he goes into this a lot more, but now let's get into the meat of the lesson. This is all his intro for the video. So after we got through the intro and this exciting stuff that he was doing and this conference that he was in and recapping and housekeeping, we got into the meat of the lesson. And the meat of the lesson, again, it's a lot of heavy stuff, right? We're getting really deep into our minds right now, the psyche and all this stuff. So this one is going into traumas, okay? Traumas. And basically what he says, we've all experienced some sort of trauma, how we visualize it to be, there's some sort of trauma, right? Name it, call it what you will. There's something we've all experienced that we would consider traumatic, okay? And so the first takeaway point from what this lesson was including is that traumas exist as memories. Right? They're usually not happening at that moment. It's something that happened and we look back on and it's a memory. Right now it's over here. And so the takeaway point two is that we don't tend to bring those memories up. It's not something at parties you're like, oh yeah, this thing happened to me. So, and because of that, he calls this a fixed memory. Fixed memory. So traumas are memories. Traumas are what we call fixed memories. So the next part is that we have social memories too. These are the things that we bring up at parties and chat about and talk about. And because of this process, because it's social, because we bring it up, they are fluid and flexible. As this memory is brought up, we have new experiences in our life, new information that we can add to this memory. So when we share this memory, the information kind of changes, the outlook on it changes, things change, right? The best example I had from this, that I have for this, if you saw my last article on Medium, I just did something that explained how my family and I were left stranded in the middle of the street in Thailand on New Year's Eve, right? Not fun. It was not fun, okay? But I'm laughing, right? But it wasn't fun. And if you had asked me a couple hours after that, once we were off the street and found some temporary shelter for the evening, my memory of a couple of hours before that would have gone something along the lines of, I'm very pissed. This is very frustrating. This is not okay. People are ridiculous. XYZ, on and on. That would be it. That would be like, oh, you want to know what happened to me today? You want to know? I'm going to tell you what happened to me today. And it would be pretty dang negative, right? Now, about a week later after that, if you had asked me what had happened, like, what was your memory of what happened on New Year's? It would change a little bit, because since then more information has happened. I received some assistance from Airbnb, which was part of the situation. We ended up in a place that was magnificent and way better than what we had actually booked. So in hindsight, now with new information, I could look back on that memory and say, you know what? It was really frustrating. It was really difficult. But we ended up in such a great place and we had a great time there. And I mean, almost kind of thankful that it happened, because it really ended up better than it could have, right? And now further on, I mean, it's still only February. It happened like last month, right? As soon as I started telling it, I was already laughing, right? So you can see as time and the information changes, the reality of what happened is still there, but that memory has adapted, right? So that's a really, really simplistic form of explaining this, and really kind of how I saw and could visualize this concept of how traumas are fixed memories. We don't bring them up. We're not dealing with it, right? And I wouldn't say that I was actively dealing on my anger with what happened that day, but because I continually brought it up, it was in conversation. I was telling my friends, like, "Whoo, guess what happened to me on New Year's?" As time went on, I had new information, and the story changed, and the way it affected me changed, right? So that's my best way of explaining that concept. So we talked about that. After that, he kind of explained the same thing. We don't tend to share these things. We keep the traumas and the memory of that isolated, and because of that, the new information doesn't get mixed with it, and it becomes fixed. It's like always stays. This trauma, it stays in that fresh wounded state, right? So they remain painful in that frustrating first version, and like when I was stranded and pissed, and we're not able to adapt any new perception to that story or experiences or information to work it out. So he says when people experience this, when we leave it like that, what happens a lot of times is what he calls frozen personalities. You get a frozen personality, and he has an article. Definitely check it out. It's called 3 Ways People Become Stuck, Underdeveloped, and Unsuccessful. It's really about this concept of frozen personalities. So when it gets stuck, when you're just frozen, right, you stop living in the present. Start identifying with this past hurt, this past trauma, and you stop transforming as a person. So you go into negative personality traits, negative behaviors, and addictions, which he says addictions are really just reactions to trauma. Right, so this is like in the extremity of what we can go to the other side when we're not dealing with those, right? So a great story that he shared, and this is actually what I'm going to call the Thorn story. And it's actually a story from The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And it explains a guy who gets a thorn in his arm, right? Gets a thorn. He's like, that hurts really bad. Not stoked on this. And it's like, oh God, you try to like check it out. You're like, should I take it out? Like, oh, it hurts. I don't want to do it. But you don't want it in, but you don't want it out. It's like, what do I do? Like, those are your two choices, right? You leave it in or you take it out. It's going to hurt. So he leaves it in and he's like, it hurts too much. I'm going to take it out. Okay. And then like he bumps it and he's like, oh my God, that hurts so bad. Okay. So then it's like, well, what do I do? Okay, I gotta sleep like a certain way because I don't want it to get touched. Like, and then he's like, goes, the next morning he gets up, he survives that, and it's like, let's put on a jacket. Like, oh no, that hurts too much. Like, now no jacket. Okay, I don't want to go into crowds. Someone can hurt it. So we make like a contraption around it. So now it's like, oh, no one can bump into me, and like just kind of making it all work to protect this thorn so nothing gets to it, right? Like, oh. And he's kind of stoked on it. He's like, like I'm managing pretty well. Getting through this. No one's touching my thorn. It's still there, still hurts, but nobody's getting, I'm all right. I'm managing. I'm surviving. Okay. But he's really building a life around the thorn. Girl life. He's not fooling anybody. Like, we see it. Like, whoa, that doesn't look like fun, guy. He builds a life protecting the thorn and avoiding the pain that taking it out could cause. Right? Because you have to like deal with it, and that's no fun. So Michael Singer is the author of The Untethered Soul and the one who mentions this story. He says, the truth is the thorn completely runs your entire life. It affects all your decisions, including where you go, whom you're comfortable with, who's comfortable with you. It determines where you're allowed to work, what house you can live in, what kind of bed you can sleep in at night. And when it's all said and done, that thorn is running every aspect of your life, right? Totally. And he says, it turns out that the life of protecting yourself from this thorn and from the problem becomes the perfect reflection of the problem itself, right? Like you can see him a mile away coming with his contraction and like it's snowing and he has no jacket. And it's just like, oh, there's Michael again. Let's pretend we don't know the thorn is there. Like, ouch, no fun. Like everything, it's clear. It's like we see you and all we see is the thorn. Okay. So he says, if you keep the thorn, you end up modifying your life to avoid situations that stir them up, right? And he goes into example. If you're lonely, you must avoid going to places where couples tend to be. If you're afraid of rejection, you avoid getting too close to people. The second option is removing the thorn. And what Michael Singer says about this is, do not doubt your ability to remove the root cause of the disturbance inside of you. It really can go away. You can look deep within yourself to the core of your being and decide that you don't want the weakest part of you running your life. Now, I highlighted this because I thought this was just so profound. You don't want the weakest part of you running your life. Right now, like this arm is no good. It's not doing great. Like there's a thorn in it. Like the rest of the arm's like doing great over here. It's probably super strong because it's been picking up for this one, right? This one's no good, but this is the one running everything. The weakest part is what's in charge of everything. I thought this was amazing. Don't want the weakest part of your life, a part of you running your life. You want to be free of this. You want to talk to people because you find them interesting, not because you're lonely. You want to have relationships with people because you genuinely like them, not because you need to be liked. You want to love because you truly love, not because you need to avoid inner problems, right? So as he sums it up so great. And what Benjamin Hardy says, is we need to pull the thorn out. We need to experience it. We need to stop avoiding these emotions. We need to reshape the memories of what those are and integrate them with our new experiences and our new thoughts. That's really the main way to go through these traumas. Okay. Michael Singer also says, in order to grow, you must give up the struggle to remain the same and learn to embrace change at all times. And I love this because I actually have, anyone sees it here, it says Anika, which is the concept of impermanence. It's that everything is always changing. The only constant thing that we can bank on, the only thing that we know is always going to be happening is that it's always going to be changing. Like that we know. If it's going to be great, if something's great, it's going to be not so great for a while. And when it's not so great, it's going to be good again. Because it's always changing. And I used to always tell people, you know, the only time where we have the hardest time in life is when we stand there trying to be immovable. And we're like, no, it's not. It has to be this way. It has to be the same. It has to. And that's where we falter, right? Standing against the waves. I grew up in California, waves there. There's a powerful, powerful waves. And not even rocks and mountains can stand up to those waves. They eventually wither, right? So ebb and flow, move with the waves, go surfing, right? That's what we do in California. Go with it. And now you're like, whoa, riding this wave, it's amazing. You're having a great time. You're one with nature, all this great stuff, right? That's when you win. That's when you get it. It's not, we can't, like he says, give up the struggle to remain the same. I'm going to stand here. It's got to be like this. Learn to embrace change at all times. One of the most important areas requiring change is how we solve our personal problems. We normally attempt to solve our inner disturbances by protecting ourselves. Real transformation begins when you embrace your problems as agents for growth. So this thing, this is going to be a change. There's going to be some change happening. So let's just embrace this and figure out what's happening. What's the next change, right? It's a whole different way of looking at that. So that's kind of this section on traumas here. It was really the meat of our lesson. And Benjamin Hardy explains that when you do these things, you know, and the thorns are triggered, that's also when you need to seek social support. It's a really great thing. You know, no one has to go through this alone. You know, something that's so big and stayed with you for so long. It's definitely great to have social support. He even says that there's a saying that says the only way out of addiction is connection. And it doesn't necessarily have to be substance abuse or something like that, but the addiction or even just the habit of dealing with this trauma or keeping that trauma with you, he says, you know, connection. So really seek that social support, someone that can help you comprehend this trauma, right? So whatever that is for you, he also shared that that's something to do. One of my favorite things that he also said in this lesson is that growth is hard. Growth is hard, I think we know that, but he says, because it's meant to purge our weaknesses. Growth is hard because it's meant to purge our weaknesses. So I loved that. If we don't, we stop growing and we plateau. And a tree is either growing or dying. There is no in between, right? And, well, already I don't want to be dying, okay? So the last section of this, and I know it's a heavy one. He told us to. He's like, guys, this is going to be a heavy one. And it is. There's a lot in there. The last section that he went over with us is that personality is not a fixed trait. Right? So we kind of touched on that a little bit with the epigenetics. Personality is not a fixed trait. So the first takeaway from that is that we can continue to develop and adapt, right? The whole, like, that's just the way I am is naive and incorrect. It's not, right? Our personalities are not fixed. So if you're like, well, I'm just, you know, sassy. Maybe I am now, but I can change and adapt. You know, if there's a reason to. We can adapt our personalities to almost anything, right? I could probably be really calm and somber if that's where I adapted to. It's hard to believe. Some of you have known me for a while. Like, what? I'm sure it's possible. It's not just I'm sure. It is possible. So including, we can adapt to anything, which includes our environment and our goals, right? So we set these high goals. We can adapt to achieve those. So if we're constantly hanging around positive people, what happens? Like, positive. And if you're always with complainers, you're going to join in and you're like, yeah, you know what? I hate that too. Oh, yeah. And everyone's like, we're just bitching all the time. Okay. Takeaway 2 from that is that it's not confidence that leads to success. It is not confidence that leads to success. This is an old thinking. I think he was saying it brought up around like the 40s or 50s. That's like they did some study and they noticed that everyone had this confidence. It was like, well, if you're confident, then you can be successful. But it's successful behavior that leads to confidence. So when we engage in successful behavior, then the confidence comes after, right? So it's that be, do, have. Okay. So quick recap with all of this stuff is that we all have traumas we need to allow to come to the surface and retrain and better understand ourselves so we don't get stuck in the past, right? We need to always be taking in new experiences with these memories. And in general, right? We should always be having new experiences. Personality is developed, and always changing. A personality is always developing, always changing. It comes from big choices in your environment, choices of your behavior, and it's, you know, biological and psychological. Most people get stuck because they believe they are fixed. You know, I've heard so many people like, well, that's just the way I am. You know how I am, Tanya. You know how I am. That's what I do. And you're like, okay, but you don't have to. You don't have to just, that's the way I am, that's the way I am. You don't have to. So like, the goal is to show, the goal here, and what he said to us is to show us that we're not fixed and that we can be who we want to be. Like the Thorn guy's not being who he wants to be. I don't think he wants to be like that guy. He's like, oh, there's Thorn guy again. He's being contraption, being weird. He doesn't want to be that. So once he heals that trauma, oh, he can be who he wants to be. Okay. Next takeaway from that is challenge. He challenged us to keep this growth mindset. Let this year be the year. Let go of these beliefs, working through them and become a new and better version of yourself. Always amazing. You can become the person you want to be, but not if you're frozen in your personality, right? So check out that article and maybe read through addressing some of any of these traumas or beliefs that we're holding on to. It's a big agent for growth, right? Something that we can really, really change and progress forward when we look at those things. So that is, like I said, lesson 5, super heavy, lots to mull over, but take it in, take a look at yourself. It's the only way that we move forward and change. There were some book recommendations from this lesson. One is called The Body Keeps Score. Sorry, I do not have author names right now. The Body Keeps Score. He recommended this for people who are dealing with healing their traumas. He said this is a big, big thing. So check that out if that's something that makes sense for you. Another one he suggested for the parents out there, or even if you're thinking about becoming a parent, is a book called Hold On to Your Kids. And the third one for romantic relationships, the book is called Getting the Love You Want. So these are the 3 books that he recommended. Not required, just recommended. So again, I'll be adding those. I think they're already added to the book list. So if you subscribe to the book list, I'm always adding his recommendations to that. So of our 2 official assignments this week, so if you are really tagging along and doing the exercises, make sure that you do that monthly reporting. So take stock of January, what were your wins, accomplishments. He says about 10 to 20 bullet points, right? It doesn't have to all just be, like big things. Like I did this huge thing, some were like, for me, I did my workout every day. Like my big win is that I was consistent. I did it every day. It could even be I tried something different. I, did this. I was getting up at 5 a.m., most times, whatever that is. So 10 to 20 bullets of what you accomplished. What were your wins, your accomplishments? What did you do? The next section is what you didn't do. You're like, well, I did this, but I didn't do it so great. Or I really set out to do this and I kind of blew it. And from there, what will your goals and adjustments be for next month? So 3 to 10 bullet points of what you're going to do next month to make it better than the last. Another part is tracking. So this is something we were all part of 90-day groups and we were sharing like a group tracking, but he now has a shift to a personal individual tracking. So this is where you're going to find your own method of tracking and you're tracking what your goals are. So goals, it can be a checklist type thing. So if there are specific goals that you're reaching towards every day that you need to keep track on, maybe it's journaling, it's a big part of this course, and just keeping track that you are journaling every day. For myself, sometimes it's just getting to bed at the time that I want. Lots of little things. I have lots of little things, and I kind of use this as a checklist as well as tracking. What am I doing? But it's also, so I open it and go, what am I supposed to do? I see it. I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay, so I can do it. So whatever works for you. For us in the group, we're required to take a picture of it and send it in. So for you, if you have a trusted friend or accountability partner or someone who you're watching these videos with, you guys can do that together and keep yourself accountable to track your progress. You never know how you're doing or how you're going or how it's going until you look at it, track it. What am I doing? Right? Until all of a sudden you're like, this isn't going so good. I thought I was doing better. Well, if you're tracking it, you would know. You wouldn't catch it by surprise. Okay? So whatever works best for you, accountability group, the ones who are actually joining and tagging along with me, you guys know a lot of this is going to be required. You already have your lesson up and ready to go, so that has already been emailed to you. So enjoy that. Of course, if you have any questions, reach out to us in the group. Thank you all for joining. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button here and you'll be notified when our next lesson comes up. We do this every week. And for any of you on the entrepreneurial path, please feel free to come and join us in our Facebook Biz Builders group. It is totally free. free. And we not only share things like this about growth and balance and all of these great things so we don't burn out, but we also do skills as well. So if you're looking for things to build, maybe you need to learn your email campaigning and marketing and Facebook or whatnot, we do lessons in there every week, totally for free. So come and join us there. There's a link here in the description. Have a great week. We'll see you guys all again next week. Bye.